Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on the Torah. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. So I want to go back to a verse which we had already explained, but I want to elaborate on it. That is chapter 10, verse 12 in the book of Deuteronomy. Chapter 10, verse 12. Moses says, and now Israel, what is God asking for you? Ki'im. Ki'im means only or only but, to fear God, to fear Hashem your God, to go in his ways, to love him, and to worship him, to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. I mean, if you read, there's so many different ways to read this verse, but for purposes of this class, let's read this verse. Like Moses is saying, all God is asking from you is to fear him. Now, if you fear him, this will inevitably bring you to, quote, go in his ways, to love God, to serve God with your entire being, both with your heart and soul. How is it that fearing God is such an amazing catalyst that can bring you to all of the other so important matters, namely serving God, worshiping him, loving him, going in his ways with all your heart, with all your soul? Amazing. That's question A. And question B, the way Moses presents it, it seems to be saying, it's no big deal. Just fear God, and then that will lead you to greater things. What do you mean it's no big deal to fear God? How do you go about fearing God that easily? How could it be that easy and that simple? Especially that leads to all these great matters, such as going in God's ways, loving him, serving him with all your heart and all your soul. Perhaps we can understand it based on a very interesting anecdote that the Talmud relates. Now notice the following. Take note of the following. The Talmud, just like the Torah, is not about just amusing us and filling up our time with interesting stuff, with entertainment. But rather, the Talmud is a book that teaches Jewish law. It teaches about life. It teaches us how to live life. So even when it does relate interesting anecdotes or stories or historical facts, it's for the purpose exclusively to teach us how to live our lives. The Talmud relates to us what happened right before the passing of one of the greatest of the sages, Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And it gives us in detail the discussion that he had with his disciples who were standing there around his bed, of course, in great reverence, waiting to swallow every word that comes out of his mouth. And towards the end of the conversation, the students, quote, said to him, our rabbi, please bless us. In other words, before your passing, please bless us. So he said to them, quote, may it be his will, meaning by the will of God, that you should have the fear of heaven should be on you, just like you have the fear of another person, of a flesh and blood. Whoa, what does this mean? In fact, the students immediately retorted and they said to him, Ad kan, literally translated until here, that means that's it? That's all you're blessing us, that we should have the fear of God like we have the fear of man? That seems to be minimizing the fear of God. And that's a very low level of fear of God, or so it seemed to them. So he said to them in response, Halavai. Halavai means like, I wish that you have at least that level of fear of God. Because, and I can prove it to you. No, he says, that when a person is about to do something disgraceful, when a person is about to do something wrong, when a person is about to do something shameful, the person always says, quote, nobody should see me. Their hope is they look around to make sure that no one's watching, that there are no cameras, that they're not going to be ashamed, they're not going to be exposed, they're not going to be caught. Well, if you have that level of fear from God, you're going to be okay. You're good to go. What was he saying to them? And what does this mean? And this can perhaps serve as a great tip for us to begin to live in that mindset of being, quote, fearful of God. What he said to them is, whenever a person wants to perpetrate something that is wrong, we're usually typically conscientious. We're aware of the fact that what we're about to do isn't correct, isn't right. Certainly, if we knew someone's watching us, we wouldn't do it because we're too embarrassed to. We would be too scared to. Thus, when we do it in private, what are we really saying? Man hasn't seen me. But we're totally ignoring the fact that God's watching. God's watching everything you do. And that's what he said to them. If you can have that awareness all the time, that you are, quote, being watched, that there is a presence, you're not alone, that you are there with God, that God is always there. And if you can have that awareness, then you're going to have fear of heaven. And that's why he considered that a blessing. And it is really the ultimate blessing. That really sums up what really fear of God is. Fear of God really is true and absolute faith in God. Not faith as an abstract thing, there's a God somewhere out there in heaven, but that God is here, God is present. And if God's present and he's, quote, looking at me, he's watching me, then obviously I'm too embarrassed to do those things that are not consistent with his will, that are not going to bring me favor in his eyes, or that are going to bring me shame in his eyes or the eyes of anyone else. That's what it means. And that's why the verse says, if you could have that basic, quote, fear of God, then that will lead you to everything good, to going in God's ways, to loving God, to serving God, because you already have that full, absolute, realistic, real-time awareness that God is there all the time. So God is present in your life. When God's present in your life, automatically you're going to go in his ways. Automatically you're going to be that perfect person that you can be, serving God at your best with your whole heart and with your whole soul.